Yee. Wow. I was holding back tears. This season of Picard was solid. I didn't think it was good as the previous season. I really, really liked the previous season, the first season. I have a podcast about the whole season. This podcast will mostly be about the finale, but with obviously what it's not an episodic series. It's kind of one long story, which I prefer. As much as I loved Next Generation, most of it was this is the mission of the week, mission of the day. It was the episodes that kind of went on a little longer were the ones that I like the most, like the best of both worlds, and the one when Picard was held hostage by the Cardassians. What was the name of that? With the four lights, things like that. The two or sometimes the two-parters really. So that's one thing that makes Picard different than Next Generation. It's a continual episode. So this season finale, while the rest of the season was okay, it's just like I'm just getting tired of time traveling. I get it. It's just been done so many times in Star Trek. Enterprise had a whole thing with it about the time travel police, and it's just been so much done. I really, part of sci-fi that I like is looking at the future. With that said, the season finale of Picard was so well done. It's almost like they saved all of their firepower for the last episode, and they crammed so much into it. But I liked what they crammed into it, from the genesis of the, pardon the pun, the genesis of the Khan project, which you kind of knew, to welcoming back Wesley Crusher. He had a very brief cameo, I think, in which Star Trek was it? The one with Tom Hardy. Not Insurrection. Whatever. I'm forgetting everything right now because I'm so overwhelmed with sadness. Because of, and it's what was done, I think, so cleverly, that's even a word, with this season, is that it built up towards the finale in such a way that it planted those seeds. So you were aware of the tragedy of Picard's childhood, which we didn't really know of before. What a tragic figure Picard is, and it's almost and it kind of answers the question why Picard wasn't successful in long-term relationships. He was married to Dr. Beverly Crusher. That didn't work out. He tried. And it could very well go back to the relationship that he had with his mother. Who can be better than his mother? But also, the pain of losing someone in such a traumatic way could make you avoid wanting to get closer to people, provided you haven't had the work put in. And Picard was very stubborn when it came to therapy, and every once in a while he would talk to Counselor Troy, but I don't know if he ever really had that much mental health guidance. But and the stakes are pretty high for the most part. Characters were lost. You thought Elnor was lost in the beginning, but I had a feeling he would be brought back just because of the whole Q factor. Rios, that was an interesting surprise. He didn't come back with the team, so he lived a life. Died the way he lived. So at least there was an ending to the character. So there's that danger and that unpredictability that comes with a show like this. And next season, there is a season 3. Thankfully, it's going to be the final one. So that's going to be really tough. They should just go on forever with Picard and Patrick Stewart. These characters I've grown up watching, and they've really become, especially during the pandemic, just a nice comfort, especially being isolated. The TV characters become my friends, and keeping me company while I'm doing the things I need to do. Where I don't go out as much as I did due to the pandemic. So it was nice having that kind of company. One thing that really stood out, which was kind of puzzling, was the whole. So when Agnes Jurati was both the Borg and Agnes, and the Borg wanted to have the chemicals in the brain created so the Borg Queen can take over. She did sing Pat Benatar from out of nowhere to where the band just started playing along, where the band was like, well, we might as well go for it because here's this complete stranger singing a Pat Benatar song. I'm not surprised that the band knew it. If they're competent professional musicians, maybe they know such a classic Pat Benatar song. I'm from Long Island. I'm on Long Island, and Pat Benatar is from Long Island and just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So congratulations, Ms. Benatar. But that just threw me for a loop. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, they could have done this in a simpler way where it wasn't so head-scratching. But, okay, all right. And not to mention the fact that it's time travel. Like, you step on a bug, it's going to change the course of time. So I guess it would just be too complicated of a story. If you like time travel and you like to read, there's an excellent, best time travel story I ever read called The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. It was a terrible movie based on it, but definitely read the book. So, yeah, and the fact that Q is there and he's a god or omnipotent, he can kind of change things around. They can kind of explain it away. It was great to see Whoopi as Guinan. It's all these old, and even the first season Picard, you got to see all the older characters, which again, provided they're used right, I love that they're there. So it was great seeing Guinan in there again, and then the younger Guinan as well, and then they swing it back around. So like I said, it was solid. They had the problem, and that Q did, and Q in his way, which as touching and heartwarming as the final scenes with Q was, we were led to believe he was having a kind of mental breakdown, which he very well could have. He was, because he was having an existential crisis. He was in his way dying, but I understood the lesson he taught Picard, but to teach him in such a way, to almost get him killed, to put him through this mental torture, there are nicer ways to do this, Q. And then how, Picard just kind of, forgave him in his own way. I don't know if I could have done that. If someone put me through that much, I'd be like, maybe you could have done this in a nicer way instead of putting me through all that and all that great stress. So I am both very much for that scene because I thought it was well done. It was a nice goodbye to Q and a character that I really liked. And it kind of explained the turbulent relationship that Picard had with him, and almost like an allegory to, they were the longest relationship they've had. They were almost a couple in a way. So maybe in some way, I read an article, I think it was Den of Geek or something, and they quoted the showrunner about, it was almost like a love affair between Picard and Q, not a physical relationship, but they've just been together for 30 years. But like I said, Q, in Q's way, I would consider that abuse, because just what he put Picard and people who are Picard cares about through. I don't know if I can completely justify that, as much as I like the Q character, and as much interest and fascination I have with the Q Continuum. Some of my favorite episodes were with the Q Continuum and all the different Q that are out there. But with that said, it did pull on the heartstrings to where Q said goodbye. And then just the overall message of reconciling with your past, how Picard kind of, met, for lack of a better term, the child within him, and the child himself that went through such a ridiculous amount of trauma, and quite the turbulent relationship with his mother, and how, going back into himself, realized what his father, and shout out to the dude from Battlestar Galactica whose name I'm forgetting, but I'm like, who is that guy? That looks familiar, and he was in Battlestar Galactica. But how, memory could play tricks on us sometimes, and how Picard reconciled with the relationship with his father. So for years, he thought his father did one thing, but then he realized, well, his father was protecting him, and trying to protect his mother, who did meet a tragic end by suicide. And so, yeah, like I said before, Picard's such a tragic figure. Not to mention the pressure and stress of being a captain and such a high-ranking, legendary Starfleet officer. But all the trauma he's experienced, whether it's through the Next Generation, whether it's through the movies, his experiences with the Borg. Such a tragic character, and a character really enveloped by a lot of trauma. And Patrick Stewart has a familiarity with trauma because his father was traumatized by World War II, and Stewart was raised in that environment. So Patrick Stewart is quite the advocate for people suffering with PTSD. So where does this lead? So this season ended with this trans warp gate that not even the Borg knows about, and Agnes, or whatever she's being called now, is it's going to be interesting. They're probably going to touch on it a little bit. I don't think they'll have to go through the negotiations of bringing the Borg into the Federation. But that was quite the surprise, how the Borg wanted to be in the Federation. It was an evolution of the Borg, and I've always been fascinated with the Borg. And some of the best Star Trek episodes have featured, are the ones that featured the Borg, and how the Borg themselves evolved. Borg is a frightening enemy, because they very rarely can be negotiated with. They don't have emotion, and they just want to assimilate you, and in a very real sense, kill you, to make you part of the collective, where you're a drone and you have no individuality. That taken to an extreme is not the best. And then at the same time, being such an individual to where it doesn't contribute to the collective, where it doesn't contribute to the greater good, that can have its disadvantages as well. And there's a whole spectrum about this. And I think that's a lot of those statements have been made with the Borg, but just such a formidable foe and a frightening enemy. But it's so interesting where they're run by a hive and by queens, and how the queens have emotion when it comes to the Borg, but the Borg themselves don't. So it was interesting to have that combining of Agnes, another character who is essentially has, for lack of a better term, died or combined or evolved to this combination of Agnes and Borg Queen, where they lived 400 years to bring them back to that moment. That was quite poetic, and that was very well done. So it's probably not going to be, it'll probably be one sentence saying, now that the Borg are in the Federation, we have to do this. But I would imagine, you can have a whole series just based on the negotiation of bringing the Borg into the Federation. Or maybe they won't. Maybe next season will be, why should we let the Borg in when they've killed countless millions upon billions of beings? So that's going to be good. And then, the rumors, well, it's not rumors, it's been confirmed, a lot of the Next Generation cast is going to be back for season 3. Like I said, I'm all for bringing people back and nostalgia, as long as it doesn't go into the realm of fan service. But even if it does, as long as it's done well, fine. I'm okay with that. Bring people back, give them a paycheck, just do it well. And we'll see if Wesley Crusher comes back. I was never a fan of Wesley Crusher. I love Will Wheaton. I think Will Wheaton's a great actor. His performance in Stand By Me was brilliant. And it was mostly the writing of Wesley Crusher, just a terribly written character. It was cringe for most of the times he was on. I never liked the character, and it was because of the way he was written. It was just an unrealistic character in the context of a whole crew of Federation officers, and Wesley is given all this preferential treatment, and it just didn't make sense. So I think it was a way to appeal to adolescents to watch the show. And as an adolescent, when that show came out, I wasn't a fan, and I'm still not. I rewatched Next Generation recently, and not a fan. But it'll be cool to see Will Wheaton hopefully come back as a traveler with Corey Soong, along with maybe the Soongs will come back in one way or another, possibly. I don't know, but it was good to see Brent Spiner as Soong or a Soong, and just quite the terrible character, terrible person. So yeah, and how, but then so that just shows the side of Q that, is willing to do a lot of damage to make a point, which brings me back to, he's not the friendliest character, but I guess we knew that going into it. And that is the arc and the struggle of Q. It's like, why care about these pesky humans? But he does. So that is the conflict within Q himself, and that's the way he's been, which is no excuse. But there was some evolution when it came to Q, just how he expressed his affection and care for Picard, beings that he considers just, nothing to him because he's omnipotent. He did find an affection to them, I guess the way that we would look at ants or something. But I myself like to not kill any ants. I like to let them do their thing. So if you look at it that way, it shows how Q has evolved, and then what happens to him next. This is probably, I would imagine, the swan song for John DeLancie as Q. Just excellent performance. I do recommend, there's an audio drama with the late, great Leonard Nimoy called Spock versus Q, where they have a debate, and they did this live in front of an audience, and it was a lot of good fun. Wow, this podcast was all over the place, but it was mostly about, instead of just the finale, about season 2, and I very much look forward to season 3. So if you look forward to listening to more episodes of this podcast, feel free to subscribe. And you can find me on Twitter at MMAM Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at MMAM Podcast. You can email me at MMAMpodcast@gmail.com. And like I said, like I've been saying at the end of every podcast, just get your information. Picard is a man who's very well informed, and that's probably because he gets his information from credible sources. So get your information from credible sources, especially now in these turbulence, the word of this podcast, and these are turbulent times. So please, sources like New York Times, USA Today, NPR, BBC, get your information from there as opposed to a podcaster or a blog or some sketchy kind of source that thinks that say they're telling you the truth, but they're really not. Stay away from the propaganda, especially now. Always, but especially now. All right, everybody, take it easy. Bye.